Attention, civilians. This emergency, I repeat, civilians, this is an emergency. It's been a deadly infection outbreak and it is spreading rapidly. Your safety is not.
Hello, Podwalkers, and welcome back to another episode of Goblin Lore Podcast. I am your host, Hobbes Q. I can be found on Twitter at Hobbes Q, and I am joined today by my co-host, Joe Redeman.
Hi, that's me. I'm Joe Redeman.
Yeah, it is.
And you can find me on Twitter at Fyndhorn. That is Fynd Horn. And we are also joined by an honorary co-host, Miss Gwennifer David Hobbes.
Gwennifer David Hobbes is joining us today on the podcast. Yeah, she decided that she wanted to get some airtime, so she's laying here in my lap right now. Goblin Lore Podcast, now with more cuteness.
Making her debut. We are broadcasting an emergency episode this weekend to react and respond to the lore announcement, sort of the final reveal, I guess, of the 36 planeswalkers that are going to be involved in the War of the Spark.
36. I mean, I just want to go back to this. 36 planeswalkers, one in every pack. Like, I have no clue what's going to look for gameplay, and from a story point, this is just amazing.
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. Standard's going to go nuts. The story is going to go nuts. I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those watershed moments in the game.
Yeah, and I'm excited because what we have here is we have a mix of walkers we haven't seen in a while, walkers we've only really seen in story.
Some that have only been in supplemental products.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a very interesting place we're at right now.
Yeah, and so this all kind of got super revealed. I mean, we saw a little bit of this in the War of the Spark teaser trailer that came out maybe a week ago. But we finally got a close look at all of the stained glass planeswalkers from that video in this article on the Mothership by Chris Gleason. So we'll link the article that Chris Gleason wrote in the show notes, but we wanted to sort of do a power ranking of the planeswalkers from least likely to not exist, or at least not have their spark at the end of this story, to most likely to hit the fan. So we've got 4 categories, 4 tiers. I think that's a little more helpful than like just ranking them in order. We sort of blocked them out by clumps, and those clumps we named: sure to survive is number 1, most likely. Likely to live, so less likely to make it through one way or the other, but still, you know, maybe fan favorites, or there's some unresolved part of their story arc that we think might be important to pushing the whole course of Magic history forward. 3 is odds on oft, so more likely than not that they are going to either lose their spark, or, you know, be offed throughout the course of this story, or that, you know, kind of that their stories maybe run a little bit of its course, and so there's a little more danger there for them. And then 4 is totally toast. People that we think are almost certainly on the chopping block for this time around, whether it's that they lose their spark and are no longer a planeswalker, or whether that they are, shall we say, written out of the story entirely. So should we get into our rankings clumps, and I can read through what I've got and you tell me what you think?
Yeah, let's do this. So I would say that Joe's going to be probably a little bit more versed in the storyline. So I have thoughts on a lot of these characters, but we're going to kind of just let him run with this because I think that this is a great topic for you. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say, and then to mock it mercilessly.
Excellent. Well, I would expect nothing more or less from you.
We basically are a sports radio show.
Well, and we were talking about this before we recorded. I had a thought just before we did this today to make sort of a March Madness style bracket for these. And, you know, whoever got to the end would be the one that would certainly survive, that sort of thing. Or I guess it could have been the other way around. Then we could have the Fatal Four That would have been
Oh,
cool.
the Fatal Four. Wow.
That would be good.
Yeah, because each round, aren't you voting on the person that's most likely to die?
Oh, there you
I mean,
go.
yeah, we're gonna get down to the four most likely to die would have been what we would have done.
We might have to do this on Twitter now. That might have to happen. We do want to give a quick shout out to some of the folks who have, popped their thoughts out there on the Twitterverse or in the form of articles on their sites about their predictions for this set and this storyline. Specifically, I love his name. His handle here on Twitter is Robot Remorse, Roberto Moser.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Well, I mean, he actually set up on his site, and we'll link it in the show notes so you can go check it out. Basically, a War of the Spark bingo. So he literally turned, kind of like these planeswalkers and their deaths into a game.
That's pretty great.
I mean, that's really what we should be doing with it. We should be celebrating Magic history by rooting for people to die.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the way to look at it. And then Lane Kaplan also put up a big thread about all 36 planeswalkers and their feelings on how that's going to go forward, and what their interaction with the story might be for this set. So that's pretty cool. We'll also link that thread in the show notes. I want to first approach one of these pieces of art that we got, and that is I marked it as number 4, I believe it was, in the article that we'll link from the mothership. It shows this hooded planeswalker sort of wearing white and blue with maybe like a little diamond insignia on the clavicle piece of the armor. There's a staff that almost looks like the corrupted graphstones of Innistrad, but she's using bluish white magic. She's got red hair. And some people have said, like, oh, maybe that's Elspeth, but Elspeth had dark hair, and blue wasn't really an element of her, and Elspeth is still trapped in the underworld of Theros, from what we know. I think that would be a lot of story that would have to be, sort of fudged in the background for us to see her in this block. And I think a lot of fans of Elspeth, would feel kind of cheated by that. So I'm not sure.
There's
Wizards
a lot of
would go that
maneuvering
route.
that would need to be done in order for this to be true.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think that's a little bit out there. Thoughts I had might be like, did Feather the Angel from the original Ravnica stories, did she, spark into a planeswalker, and that's maybe where she's been? Hashtag where Feather at? Is this sort of a manifestation of Sarah, the old walker who was around in Urza's time but disappeared and possibly died a long time ago? We don't really know. There's a lot of stuff that this could be. This is the only planeswalker that we have that we have no idea, that we have absolutely no clue who this is.
yeah.
So that one we're not ranking. That's
Isn't there also belief it could be the one from one of the supplement products that was only released in China?
Well, and so that's the other one. That's the picture 12 in this series, and that depicts a planeswalker with sort of one of those wider brimmed, conical, almost looking like a traditional Chinese rice paddy hat. Looks a little bit floppier though. Longish white hair, sort of a green and white colored motif and feather sort of pattern on the skirt and armor. She has sort of like a whip sword almost, but we don't see her face. And it's... A lot of people have thought that might be, like you said, Mu Yanling, who is the other planeswalker in the Global Deck series. Choose the blue walker in that one. And so that's my only hesitation with saying that this is Mu Yanling, is that there's a lot of green and white in this.
Okay.
And so I don't know if that's her. So we have some questions about this, but a lot of the imagery in this picture looks like it could be Mu Yanling, who is sort of wind and water element associated.
Yeah. And Gwen would like to have the return of Elspeth, but she's also willing to wait a little longer for a better storyline, I think, which is my only reason to really think that, or at least hope maybe that this isn't Elspeth, is because I think that I want to see her in the underworld, and I think that's a more important story than what we would have here.
I agree. Or if we even just went back to it later, that would be kind of a bummer. So I think Wizards will have that payoff when it's time.
Yeah.
But those two are our big question marks. We don't know where they are. I will say, though, that I did put, if it is Muyan Ling or Elspeth for that matter, I put them in the first tier, in Sure to Survive.
Yeah.
And for two separate reasons. Muyan Ling is one of our newer characters and is one of the characters that they're trying to pitch as more global as to, the East Asian market. So I don't think that they would sort of take that amount of branding and story that they put into her and just expunge her right away from the storyline.
And I think with Elspeth, we're not bringing Elspeth back to kill her.
Exactly. Absolutely.
If she is back right now, she is not coming back to die. One last thing that I want to just hit on really quick before we move into our rankings is that are some noticeably absent planeswalkers, at least from the artwork.
Yes.
And I think that is important for at least two of them. And the two that I want to talk about real quick are Tezzeret, because we know that the planar portal is something that he was very much involved in and is what's kind of probably allowing Bolas to do this. So his lack of art is very conspicuous. We know that he has been a servant of Bolas in the past. It's very odd. And then the other one is Garrick.
Right. And so this seems like it would be a great place for him to return. That's kind of like the perfect spot for him to become corrupted by Bolas and be a weapon of his disposal or something like that.
Or just show up really angry and like trying to kill Jace.
Right, absolutely. Well, and so the last time that we saw Garrick, he was being corrupted by the magic of the Chain Veil, which Liliana had used on him. Jace implanted a Hedron from Zendikar in his forehead to soak up some of that magic and keep him from completely corrupting into a demon, a la Obnixilis. But Garrick then wandered off basically into the Blind Eternities and hasn't been heard from since. I think the biggest reason that people have sort of justified why Garrick isn't coming back here is because we already have a couple of planeswalkers who are not sort of interested in the city plane of Ravnica or, the sort of the civilization aspect, like Domri Raid and maybe Sarkhan and some of those others that we don't need that element. That's already covered.
We already got those covered in who's there.
Right.
Yeah.
But Tezzy is the big missing piece. It's a big question of where is he going to be and what is his role going to be in the story then going forward?
Yeah.
Because it seems then like the implication will be that he survives this.
Yes.
So we don't know. We don't know where those are, and those aren't in our rankings for now. And I did put a list of who is notably missing from Planeswalker, at least from the cards, up on Twitter, and we'll link that in the show notes too. But let's just dive in then into our first tier.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Sure to Survive. In alphabetical order, I have Chandra, Davriel Kane from the Brandon Sanderson story, Huatli from Ixalan, Jace, Jiang Yanggu from the Global Deck series, the Green Planeswalker, Kaya, the Ghost Planeswalker from Fiora, or where we first saw her was Conspiracy 2, Nissa, Saheeli Rai from Kaladesh, and Teo Verada, who's going to be one of the new planeswalkers that we see in this Ravnica story. They're the ones depicted on the cover of the Ravnica book as doing the geometry magic. So that is tier 1, the people that I am almost certain, I would say 95th percentile, will survive. Are there any there that stand out to you that you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I think that we're running into kind of this, the question too has been for a long time. I think that this category is tough because, as you said, these all make sense to me. And at least one of these could have a very impactful death. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to get into this a little bit further, but I do think there is going to be an impactful death. And I am still very curious, and maybe you're going to talk about this, but who you think that's going to be.
Yeah, so there could be one in that group, I think, that could go. I think depending on how they use Teo, if Teo is just sort of the disposable point of view character for the audience in this story, then I could easily see them being the one that goes here. I just think that primarily the characters like Huatli, Jiang, Kaya, and Saheeli and Taya, especially those couple, they kind of fall into my shiny new toy category, where it's like these are new characters who have a lot of story to tell. There was a lot of creative invested in them, or a lot of branding, that I'm not sure that Wizards is going to want to kill them off or dispose of them as planeswalkers right away.
So for me in this list, the one that I could see actually potentially at least losing their spark, if we're talking about this as being the fully sparked category, is Kaya. So
why do you say that?
Her tie kind of to the spirit / ghost realm, and looking at the fact that I think that her trying to regain that could be an important storyline, would be very, very interesting.
And one last note, I think, before we move off of this tier, because I don't think there's a lot to discuss here. Maybe Davriel is a little bit highly ranked here, but again, they wrote a whole story where he's the sort of anti-hero, antagonist character, villain-ish. There's a lot of stuff. He's a complex character that I don't think they're going to want to mess with too much here. He could easily move into a larger villain role as the story goes along.
Yep.
But the last thing I want to note is Jiang's pupper, Mowu, shows up in the stained glass art, which means that Mowu can planeswalk too.
Yes.
Mowu is on Ravnica, and my goodness, Wizards, don't you dare hurt that pupper.
I mean, basically, isn't it an adorable corgi? I mean, like,
yeah.
You can't.
It might be like a
that.
Shiba Inu, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's something adorable that if you kill, you're just like, everybody's coming for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, yeah.
Can't
but
do it.
I did love the fact that was in the art.
Oh, so good. He's such a good boy.
Yeah.
Speaking of good boys, let's move on to tier 2, and that's likely to live. So again, not guaranteed, but I'd still say over 50%. Likely to survive with a spark intact, or survive the whole thing in total. And so again, alphabetically, I ranked these as Angrath, the Minotaur that we met on Ixalan, Ashiok, who is the Dream Stealer planeswalker that we met in Theros, Gideon Jura, Karn, Liliana Vess, Narset, who was the Ojutai, and before that in the other storyline, what was the name of them? The Jeskai aligned planeswalker from Tarkir. Samut, the warrior who saw through the gods and through Bolus's charades on Amonkhet. Sarkhan, Tamio, and Teferi.
Yeah, you have a lot. You have a lot there, right? I mean, that's
right.
This is your large category, and I think that's because there are a lot of people here that like you said, 50-50. Like, this is our group that really could go either way.
Right. And so I think the big ones that stick out that I want to talk about right away are Liliana and Gideon.
Okay.
What do you think their odds are of getting through this completely intact, or or make the case for me, one way or the other?
So Gideon is the one that I would say I'm most likely to be like, he could have that kind of quote unquote Messiah dying, sacrificing himself storyline. I mean, we've talked a lot about Gideon on here on the cast, especially notably in our trauma episode. And his trauma came because he was not able to save people, his friends in particular, which has led him to be a little reckless at times. But we talked a lot about this, about like, that is kind of it was a huge trauma for him. And I do wonder if he could get into a kind of self-sacrifice kind of role that he could, like I said, once again, there's a lot of discussion about, are we going to see a bunch of these planeswalkers kind of return back to human form, a la the Flipwalkers reversed?
Right.
And Gideon, I think if he goes, I do not think that would be the case. I actually think Gideon, if he dies, is going to die.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think he's a candidate to lose his spark. I think he would pull like a Freyalise or Lord Windgrace from Time Spiral, where they sealed up a time rift or righted a great wrong by sacrificing their entire, ability powers.
Right.
Liliana, I think, is also obviously getting a lot of buzz as, she betrayed the Gatewatch, and she's the one commanding the army of the Eternals, and she's done a lot of bad things in her past, and so maybe this is a way to sort of give her a redemption arc before sort of killing her off and closing that circle. I don't know that I think... the reason that I put her in this category and not lower and not more likely to be offed by the end of this is that I do think that she has plenty of story left to tell if Wizards wants to go that way. She's a very complicated character, obviously, but I think that leads to much more to unravel. She's the oldest one of the Gatewatch. And so there's a lot of stories of where she's been through the last almost millennium, tying up loose ends, dealing with the mystery of the Chain Veil. There's all this sort of stuff that could still be dealt with.
I probably have her in my category of likely to lose her spark, because I think there still is enough emotional response to that. And do you think that there's enough emotional that we kind of weight that comes with that, where it is significant, that is short of her dying completely and not really... like you said, ending her story, because she does have still story to tell, but that story could be a very different story.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. That would be one way to sort of have it be a penance that she pays. A couple of other characters that I think still have plenty of story to tell. That's why they're in this category and maybe not lower. Tamio. She has, especially one of the main threads she has to wrap up is what happened with Emrakul on Innistrad, where Emrakul used mind-controlled Tamio and used one of her scrolls of magic to seal herself in the moon. Mm-hmm. Teferi still has to deal with getting back Zalfir and phasing that in. Karn still has to go to New Phyrexia and use the new Silex and cleanse the planet of the Phyrexian influence, and then also still hop around the multiverse and root out Phyrexia wherever it is, because let's be honest, Urza's still inside of Karn and
he was we didn't talk about him as our noticeably absent character. Come on.
He's there. I think too, Sarkhan and Narset haven't seen each other in a while, and that's a story that could be dealt with as well. There's plenty of storyline there to look forward to, and Narset could actually be a big player in this storyline because of the Core 19 stories that we got, the Core 19 little novella bits online, where the Temur shamans from, what was her name? The granddaughters of Yasova Dragonclaw recorded the history of Tarkir inside that cavern. So if Narset's been paying attention to that stuff and gathering information about when Bolas first arrived on the plane, then that might be, she might have sort of the secret to defeating him. So I don't think she's expendable so much. The other two, Angrath and Ashiok. Ashiok also has a lot of complex background that we could maybe deal with and is a fan favorite. Angrath is a fan favorite because, Mad Minotaur Dad.
Yeah. I find him a little bit more expendable. I think the Minotaur contingent is a little... They're vocal, but I don't know how much Wizards is going to care as much about that.
Yeah. All right. Third tier. So again, this is odds on off. Characters that we could see in this storyline really make a huge sacrifice, whether that's their life, whether that's physical effect or losing their spark. And that, again, alphabetically, I have a Johnny Goldmane, Arlen Cord, the werewolf planeswalker from Innistrad, Domri Raid, Dovin Baan, Kiora, the merfolk planeswalker from Zendikar, Ral Zarek, Vivian Reed, who we met in Core 19 and is the green-aligned hunter planeswalker, and Vraska.
Vraska, really? man, Vraska could be very impactful and also is not. I mean, yes, I don't really want her to go.
I agree with you. I don't want her to go. I think that she might be the one, though, where Wizards gave us this beautiful story where she and Jay... Again, this is a bummer, but I think Wizards might use her as the vehicle to have redeemed Jace in our eyes, and then totally rip our heartstrings out by having her go down in this story before she and Jace get that chance to reconcile again.
Yeah.
That's just my vibe. It might not happen, but I feel like because, again, she has a really complicated and torturous past, but we did see a bit of the redemption arc already. That seems like something that's getting set up on the tee to be knocked out for us.
Yes. Yeah. Johnny, so Cat Dad, let's talk about that, because I think that's got to be tough for you to just...
That is a tough one.
Yeah. You're willing to off Cat Dad, huh?
I'm not. I don't want it to happen. But again, think about the arcs that all these characters are going through. Johnny has had a long history with Bolas, and I could see this being a moment where if it's not Gideon making a big sacrifice, I think the other white aligned planeswalker is going to.
Yeah.
And
we are kind of, I mean, in some ways we are, I think, acknowledging that white is the one that we are associating with the kind of the Messiah, or
yes.
not Messiah, but kind of the self-sacrifice martyr type thing.
Yes, I think so. Well, and doesn't Ajani sort of fit that Obi-Wan Kenobi type of mentor role where maybe it's his death that inspires them to push through to the finish?
Yeah.
Like that's sort of the vibe that I get from that. Although, and again, this is why I don't have him in tier 4. I don't think that he's I don't think it's like all but certain that he's out in this story.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
And I do, and again, I think there's some misogynistic stuff that plays into this, and I'm trying to be aware of that in my own rankings. But there's a character who is in tier 4 that I think fills a similar role to Ajani, but I think is almost certain to go here. Also, You'll notice that I do have 4 of the Bolas aligned guild leaders, including Vraska, but the 3 of the others, I think some of those characters who aren't super fan favorites, but have thrown their lot in with Bolas will find themselves on the wrong end of losing a spark at the very least.
So, I mean, I am noticing that, I don't know if I call it a bias, but right now you definitely are moving towards a storyline in which Bolas is almost not even going to say, I'm not even getting to where the fact that you haven't brought him up yet, but you don't only have him kind of losing here. You have him getting completely wrecked.
I do.
And I'm very interested by this because you have him basically being ineffectual, it sounds like.
Not ineffectual. No.
Well, no, I mean, like,
This isn't a power ranking. This is just who I think by the end of this story is most likely to be left standing.
Sure, but it's none of the people who are aligned with Bolas.
But I think I agree with you. But like I'm saying, I think it's easier to find. I sort of think, with the amount of storytelling that's been invested in a lot of these hero characters, it is much easier to replace some of the villain characters who are designed to be disliked. You know what I mean? Like, we've never really had a reason to love Dovin Baan. Some people like him as a character, and some people, I'm sure, love him as a character, but he's always been kind of on the wrong side of everything so far, from the time that we've met him. And so I think it's sort of that thing where it's easier to set up villains. There's a reason why Spider-Man is there all the time, and he has a what do they call it, a murderer's row or a Legion of Doom or whatever. There's a cavalcade of villains that are set up for him to knock down, sort of.
But there are also like core villains that are necessary. Even if he knocks them down, they get back up too. True. I mean, as of right now, I'm going to go more Batman here. You don't have Batman without the Joker.
Sure. No, I agree.
So And right now, we basically have the Avengers without, like, I mean, like I said, this is a war, right? This is a war for the Sparks. And as of right now, Sparks are not being lost. Like, to me, War of the Spark means that somebody, we believe Bolas, is gathering power from these Sparks, okay?
Right.
If we don't have good guys dying, there's no war.
Oh, for sure. And I think we will. I think it's, again, the way I assigned this list is more probability. Like, I think not only is Bolas going to take out some of these heroes, it's just there are a lot of characters that I think can be aligned with the heroes, or the side opposite Bolas at the very least. You know, I don't know if they'll all be heroes. And some of them will be off or lose their spark throughout this. But I think that by the end of this story, we know that the Gatewatch, or some of them, are going to come out on top because the story has to go on. So at a certain point, you go like, okay, so it's like, you know, more of the villains have to lose than the heroes. And on top of that, who's to say that Bolas isn't going to, you know, drain his lieutenants as well once he gets there, you know? It's not, I don't necessarily think that the heroes are going to take out Dovin Baan. I think that, like, Bolas might take out Dovin Baan because once he starts the whole process, like, well, you're an expendable piece.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, that's just my logic with it. I think that's a good critique. I agree. I guess the one last piece that I want to talk about here, just just to run these quick down, are Arlen Cord and Kiora and Vivian Reed. Those three are compelling characters, and I know that there are fans of those characters out there for sure, but I don't know that they have the broad base appeal that a lot of people, that would, I think, guarantee them to be carried on as core story parts. And specifically Vivian Reed, who it seems like is on sort of a death wish hunt of Bolas and will, either end Bolas or die trying.
Yep. I actually had her very high on my list of people that are not surviving.
The fourth tier here, the people that I think are totally toast. This tier, in alphabetical order: Jaya Ballard, Nahiri, the Lithomancer from Zendikar, Nicol Bolas, Obnixilis, the demon planeswalker originally from Dominaria, I think, but then was trapped on Zendikar for a while.
Yeah.
Sorin Markov from Innistrad.
Okay, yep.
Tibalt, also from Innistrad.
Oh, come on, okay, yep.
And Ugin, the Spirit Dragon.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
And so the big ones obviously here, I think the main two are Nicol Bolas and Ugin. Those are the two biggest ones that will be the central conflict of this, I think.
Our own new version of a Brothers' War.
Look at that.
Yeah,
Dominaria rippling out throughout the universe.
I'd been waiting for that for a while.
I'm proud of you. That was
Thank
good.
You. But yes, you have Ugin and Bolas in this category.
And I think that would be sort of a really poetic arc to see their story of how they were born together, how they grew up together, and sort of diverged. But then at the end of it all, that they both come back together, and whether it's that they reconcile, whether it's somehow magical hand wavy that they merge and become a greater being and then go, peace out, I'm not going to mess with this stuff anymore, or whether they both kill each other. I think they're both going to bring each other down or up or whatever.
I'm just still stuck on the super being.
That would be cool, right?
Yeah, the meld features that we had. Yeah,
the new Ur dragon right there.
Oh, okay. So obviously, I do honestly believe that they are going to wrap up Bolas in some way, shape, or form here, not wanting to be kind of continuing with him. At this point, I do not believe Bolas is done. I do think that Bolas was more interesting when he wasn't always there. I always wanted him to return, and then they went the other extreme and made him return and had him in like every set and every storyline, and multiple versions of his cards. We get the origins. I mean, we've been setting this up, and now even someone like me is fatigued.
Right.
Okay, with Bolus. Now, I do not think that Bolus is going to die.
I agree.
Yeah. He may slink off to the meditation realm. He may planeswalk there and then lose his spark and be kind of stuck. But yes, Bolus is going to get wrecked at the end of this because this is Magic the Gathering. This is Wizards. The good guys are going to win. They're not nihilistic enough to have Bolus win.
And I think conversely, because Ugin is that mirror image of Bolus, is that completely, and we talked about this very early on in the show history, because Ugin is that complete mirror image, I think without Bolus, there is no Ugin. I don't think Wizards will let Ugin be a major player in the story if Bolus isn't a major player in the story. So one way or another, Ugin is also going to slink off to the blind eternities and study Eldrazi, or will dissipate into 1,000 beautiful sparkly pieces and become a part of all of us. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, that sort of thing.
Yep. I mean, I fully agree. So.
The other one here is another personal grudge that I'm really interested in, and that is Sorin Markov and Nahiri. I think both of them are out for blood. I think both of them are similar to the Vivian Reed aspect. I don't think either of them is going to stop until the other is out. That to me feels like the next most like vicious personal grudge that there is in this, and so I think there is going to be, a climactic sub battle here between those two, and I think it'll be much less about like, Nahiri's aligned with the heroes or Bolus, and Markov is aligned with, whatever. I think it's going to be like, nominally they're that, but really they're just throwing in with the other sides so that they can kick the other one's ass.
Yeah, they want the opportunity to fight the other one. Now, the one thing that I will wonder about here, similar to what you kind of said with Tamiyo and the Emrakul storyline, to Emrakul also. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure why one versus the other would be. I'm not sure if Nahiri's story is done either.
That's a fair point. I don't know that Wizards necessarily wrote much of a continuation for her into the story so far, at least as clearly as Tamiyo.
Yep.
But you're right that she's connected to that plot line as well, and so maybe this is a spot where Nahiri could be up one category, and I could totally see that.
Yeah. So, okay.
So, two that are completely not fan favorites, really haven't had a lot of storyline, really aren't that interesting, frankly, to me. And I think he's a fun and fascinating card because I like to be contrarian, but Tibalt is one, and Ob Nixilis is the other. I think those two just will be wrapped up as loose ends in this storyline.
And I think Tibalt, honestly, unfortunately, is really getting hammered here because of how bad the card associated with Tibalt is.
Yep.
I actually think Tibalt showing up kind of, I'm going to be interested to see, like, I could just see him as just chilling with the Rakdos so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How great would it be if he did survive all of this and just ends up as like, the doorman for Rakdos himself? Like he's Rakdos's like right-hand man now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be hilarious. I guess, third in command behind Judith, because Judith rocks.
Yeah, yeah.
The big one here that I think is the biggest bummer, but I'm pretty sure her time is going to be running short, is Jaya Ballard.
Yeah, Jaya's gone.
Yeah, and I think we one of our good friends, Gianelli of the Vorthos cast, during the whole run up to Dominaria, was thinking that Jaya Ballard would end up dead in that story. Yep. It didn't turn out to be true, but I don't think that was a bad instinct. I think that they have been bringing back Jaya to be, again, like we were saying with the Johnny, that Obi-Wan Kenobi type role where she's mentoring Chandra, she's bringing Chandra forward and giving her all of her tools, all of her secrets to do better, and then sooner or later the mantle will pass.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree with this.
So that's it. I want to ask you, so we agree that Bolas is not going to be the big bad of Magic's storyline after this. If you had to name one, and I'll be honest, I don't think Wizards is going to go, quote, big bad anymore. I think they've realized that that's, not great for storytelling, and that sort of pigeonholes them in terms of even the creation of cards and worlds and all that sort of stuff. But if you had to say who the primary or, most prominent villain is going to be after this storyline, who fills that void?
I think it becomes the person that we have not heard from in a while, and that is Tezzeret, the person who's conspicuously absent. I think Tezzeret has a lot more of a story to tell.
Yeah, I think he's the odds-on favorite for me as well. I could see Davriel stepping into that role as well,
Kind of end up with what you were talking about before with like a rogues gallery, where we return to kind of, that we return to kind of more one-offs for a while. We're going to have an overarching story, but are we going to just more focus on some individual planes and wrapping up loose ends? So are we going to have our big characters coming back, but some of the stuff that we talked about, that these storylines of why you think people are going to survive, are we just going to kind of focus on them? Are we going to return to Mirrodin and wrap that up? Are we going to spend more one-plane sets now so that we can tie up some storylines and finish off the stuff?
It's a really exciting moment, I think, for Magic's story. It's kind of all wide open after this now.
That's our show. You can find the podcast at Goblin Lore Pod on Twitter, or email any questions, comments, or concerns to goblinlorepodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support your friendly neighborhood gob-slugs, you can do so at patreon.com/goblinlorepod. Goblin Lore is hosted by Hobbes Q, who you can find on Twitter at Hobbes Q. This episode was written and co-hosted by Joe Redeman, who you can find on Twitter at Fyndhorn. That's FYND Horn. Engineering, editing, and production also done by Joe Redeman. Our music is by Vintergotten, who you can find at vintergotten.com. Logo by Stephen Raphael on Twitter at Stephen Raffle. And remember, goblins, like snowflakes, are only dangerous in numbers.